My name's Jon Terry. I'm the COO of LeanKit. And I want to talk to you a little bit about something that we do within LeanKit that I want to share because I think it's something that could be useful for you as well. This is something that we call fizz-good, and I will tell you more about specifically what that means in a minute. So LeanKit is well, I think as of today, a 70-person company. So we're a small software shop. We're a small SaaS company. Oh, wow. I guess there's a timing in that slide. This is my who is this guy slide, which you don't need to read, but the gist of it is I've done some very big stuff for very big companies. So even though, and I've done work in construction, and I've done work in industrial, and I've done work in logistics. So I think, even though this is something that we developed to use inside our small SaaS software company, that these ideas are generally applicable. And that's why I think they're worth sharing, even though you're not necessarily in a 70-person SaaS software company. Okay, so some background. So like I said, LeanKit is about 70 people right now. LeanKit started, like most small software companies, with 4 people in my friend Steven's basement, and later on in my dining room. And in the beginning, we were people who had done Lean and Agile in previous jobs. We had a lot of background in this. We went to conferences, we talked at conferences. And so our Lean and our Agile was implicit and instinctive. We didn't talk about it, it just happened. And later on, as we grew and we added team members, those team members were working shoulder to shoulder with the founders of a company that does Lean and Agile for a living. LeanKit's a Kanban company, so we did that. And again, our Lean and Agile was implicit. And we didn't talk about it much because we didn't need to, because it was just in the air and in the water. And we did lots of Lean and Agile things. So I mean, we use our own tool, LeanKit. We eat our own dog food to run everything. So we were doing Kanban, and we were measuring things, and we were measuring our throughput. We were doing all the good Lean Agile things that we're supposed to do. And it was working well. Actually, it was working very well for a long time, about 4 years. And then probably 6 months ago, roughly around the time that we hit 50 people, started not working so well. And we started running into problems and started trying to figure out what was causing those problems. And in particular, one of the things that happened with us is last fall we had a big release. And we successfully rolled out a new version of our product for the construction industry, and new capabilities about rolling up statistics, and new versions of multiple mobile apps, and all kinds of different things at the same time. And in public, at the time in front of our employees, we in the management team all said, "Yay, that's fantastic, great job guys, we coordinated all that stuff and made it happen at the same time without any problems." And then we walked into a room together and we said, "Let's never do that again." That was horrible, because we had to coordinate all the people in the company and vendors outside the company for a scheduled change of a bunch of stuff at the same time. And it was terrible. And what was even worse was we were starting to have conversations about how we need to better coordinate things like that in the future, and how we need to start putting in place processes so that we can coordinate those things. Bad, really, really bad. So unlike perhaps some people in the room here, I have learned about SAFe. I'm not yet an SPC, but I actually think it's a good model for big companies doing big things. We at our size didn't need to start doing those kinds of coordination things. And so what we said was, well, if we're not going to do this scheduling and coordination across teams, how is it that we're going to maintain our ability to deliver effectively and quickly and so on? If that's not the right way, maybe yet. Again, maybe at a certain point in scaling it will be. When we've got hundreds and thousands of people, yes, absolutely. But probably when we've got up to a couple hundred maybe, and we're doing mostly still software, we shouldn't need that. But what is it that we need? So we started trying to say, for things that were working, if we could abstract those, what would those things be that would work? in going forward here and talking about this fizz-good, I am not suggesting an or. This is not a new method that replaces anything. We are lean people, we do Kanban, we believe in the Agile Manifesto, we do DevOps for our operations. All of those things are good and right and proper, and anybody, you know, as you learn to do those, keep doing those. Keep doing those things. So this is not an or, this is a suggested maybe and that could help you. And the and part about it here is, if you think about it, a lot of these things that we learn in these methodologies are about how to organize the organization, how to structure your organization, how to structure your work at a systems level. And that's good. I mean, systems thinking is really important, and most of the big problems that you have to solve are at a systems level. People can't solve all the problems from the bottom up. But there are better ways for an individual in an Agile organization to act to make that organization more effective, to make these things work more effectively. To kind of latch on to something that David said this morning, a lot of these things are about the board. They're about the process flow. They're about the team structure. What we needed to do was give our employees something that would help them better do the cards, because that's where the problem was coming from in this big release, is that the cards had not been effectively structured and had led to a lot of dependencies and coordination and all those kinds of things. So what we came up with was fizz-good. Fizz-good being an acronym for frequent, small, good, and decoupled. And this is, we believe, and you know, maybe it evolves, but we think that this is a good description of, if I'm an individual employee in an Agile organization working with other individual employees and talking about how we do something, that these would be some good candidate characteristics to describe what work should be and what it shouldn't be. And we did this, we came up with it, it's on its own. There was no vowels. Happily, the fizz-good thing just you know, came out of nowhere. And what we've discovered actually with our employees is, since we started rolling this out, it's actually really easy to say. And so just like I had on the title slide, what we found is our employees talk to each other and they say, yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah, that feels pretty good, or the reverse. So we think again, we believe in the Agile Manifesto. We believe in Kanban principles. We believe in Lean principles. I couldn't tell you what all those things are right now, and I certainly couldn't use them in a short conversation. What we wanted to give people was something that they could remember easily in a short conversation. This did it. All right, so frequent. So this one takes the least discussion, but this is the idea that we shouldn't be in a world where we're doing annual releases, quarterly releases, sporadic releases, especially in the world of software, and frankly in any world these days, because even a car is a software platform these days. Frequent as you possibly can make your releases to as close to a production environment as you possibly can get is the right thing to do. So frequent. You know, the quintessential frequent these days is the mobile world, right, where you don't even know when there are releases, you just get updates on your phone, it just happens. So Facebook basically was doing 4-week releases to production until September, and then in October when they went to 2-week releases, and I think they might be 1-week releases by now. So, you know, that's we've all learned about that really frequent release. But elephants can dance too. So this is a slide talking about Microsoft's Dev Tools group, where they've gone from doing annual releases for their Team Foundation Server product to doing continuous delivery to their web product, which then gets incorporated monthly and quarterly into their on-prem product for beta customers, and then gets implemented for the general release once a year. But they're doing continuous delivery even for a giant system, a giant on-prem system. So frequent is really, really good. And one of the things that we really wanted to push to our employees, so when I say this, I'm not just talking about the software group. I'm talking about the marketing team, I'm talking about the sales team, I'm talking about the finance team. Because if you're in an organization that's doing technology delivery, all of those other teams are part of your technology delivery organization. They're dependencies. If you're not doing this for everybody, it's going to be very hard to break dependencies within the software group if you're not doing this for everybody else. So what we told people is, and you can see this is the, the can there that's about to spit because he can't hold things in anymore. this frequent delivery should be, if I'm a person who has somebody further downstream in the value stream from me, I should be delivering to that person. I should be releasing. Releasing meaning I hand it to you and I take my hands away and I have no control over it anymore. I should be releasing increments of value to the next person in the value stream as quickly as I can, frequently, continuously. Okay, the only way that you can do that is you've got to do things small. You have to do things small. So the reason I say that is because of math. Again, I'm a believer in the Agile Manifesto, but this is not a matter of belief systems or because wise people who went to a ski resort said that you should do these things. The reason that you should do small in delivery of anything in a production system is because of math, plain and simple. In any system of sequential delivery and constrained resources, as utilization of those resources approaches 100%, cycle time, i.e. delivery speed, asymptotically approaches infinity. So if you're fully busy, well, first off, if you say you're fully busy, you're lying to yourself. Because if you were fully busy, you would literally be getting nothing done. That's the way systems work. If you think you're fully busy, what you probably are is maybe 90% utilization. So this is, you guys can get the slides later, but this is a mathematical example of what happens when you start limiting work, making work smaller, and go from 90% utilization. So at 90% utilization, this system, with no WIP limits in place, has an average cycle time of 10 days. If we implement a WIP limit, which is twice that current cycle time, the inverse of that throughput, what we do in return for having 1% slack capacity in our system, which basically means saying no 1% of the time, we get 28% faster. That's the way the math works. If we're willing to go to saying no 5% of the time, being at 85% actual utilization, we are 54% faster than in that 90% utilized thing. So when we talk about limiting WIP, when we talk about doing smaller releases, this is not draconian, drastic, you have to stop doing everything. This is tiny, small changes in the amount of WIP that you have in your system produce dramatic, matter of fact, they produce the most dramatic improvements in processing speed. One of the things I should say here is everything I know about this I learned at the knee of Don Reinertsen. If you want to actually know this at the level where you really know it at your gut, his books are fantastic, his workshops are even better. So if I can be a salesman for him in any way, I want to do that. Okay, so reducing utilization is good. Doing that directly is very hard, but by implementing WIP limits, we can get dramatic improvements. Problem, though, this gets into, so this is size in two different ways. The problem is that if you have variable sized work in your system, it's very hard to limit WIP, because you might be limiting WIP by sort of number of cards flowing in the system, but if some of those cards are waiting to explode on you because they're actually bigger on the inside, then you haven't limited WIP as effectively as you think you have. So the only way over time to sustainably limit WIP is to reduce not only the size of work in the system, but the batch size of the individual items. What we hear all the time is that some things are just naturally big, right? You can't break those things down. What we say about that is, no, they're actually, they're notorious for that, but it just ain't true. We think, our experience is, if you dig deeper into why something can't be broken up smaller, if you dig, and you dig, and you dig, and you dig, and you dig, what you'll eventually get into is, well, there's some form of transaction cost that prevents us from breaking the work down smaller. And what I would suggest to you is that if you do careful analysis of cost of delay of your work, you will find that whatever you would pay to decrease those transaction costs and allow your organization to break work down in that way will easily be paid for. The cost of delay will easily pay for whatever you invest in decreasing those transaction costs. So our advice to our people, usually what they're saying in the end, and they're not wanting to verbalize this, is what they're usually saying is, well, yeah, but we'd have to get this deployment system, or yeah, but we'd have to get this testing system, or yeah, but we'd have to get some extra servers, or something like that. And what we are pushing our people to do is say, don't hold those things inside. If you see something that you can't break down, I want you to not say, I can't break it down. I want you to say, I can if. And then let that be an external organizational decision about whether the cost of delay outweighs the cost of reducing the transaction costs. Because time really, really is money. Sometimes you think you've broken things down, and you haven't done that as effectively as well, actually, let me just take a step back. If you break things down effectively, then you can move away from classes of service or prioritization. And ideally, as much as possible, what you're trying to do is move to a FIFO system. You're trying to move to a system where you're asking your employees just to operate on whatever is the next thing in the queue. Just push things through, push things through, push things through. And this is the idea of round robin work is I pick up this thing, and then I pick up the next thing, and then I pick up the next thing, and the next thing. This is like packet switch processing in telecoms. Sometimes we don't work on homogeneously sized items, like I was just saying. So when that's true, you have to come, this works when all the packets are the same size. Sometimes they're not, though. Sometimes, instead of a round robin, you have fat robin. And fat robin blocks up the system. And so you have to present a countermeasure for that. And basically, what we want to encourage our people to do is when that happens, we're going to have to trim that big thing down. Whatever that big item that we failed to break down effectively is, we need to do that breakdown. But first, so we need to exercise, we need to trim it down. But the first thing is we got to stop digging. You don't solve those problems in place. In order to keep the system running effectively and smoothly, what you want to do when you have one of these large items that's blocking the system is you want to pull it out of the line and move on to the next small thing and process those things. And then take that larger item and reprocess it to make it smaller out of band. So that's the idea of fat robin scheduling as opposed to round robin scheduling. Okay, so frequent, small, good. Good, unlike frequent, which was as opposed to infrequent, small, which was as opposed to big, good is a middle thing here. So what we want to do is encourage our folks to think of they need to deliver good product, which is in the middle of garbage and gold-plated. So to function effectively, we can't make crap. We can't sustainably make crap and keep going. But we also can't afford to architect systems that will last for the ages. And this sort of comes in two flavors in this good. One is it relates to the customer viewpoint. So this is a sort of a famous phrase by Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, who said if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you ship too late, right? You tried to make it too good before you got it out there. Or the other example, so this is the example of the iPhone, right? So the iPhone is the shiniest product that man or God ever devised, right? And it always has been, and Apple only produces things that are wonderful and amazing and just, they float on water because they're angelic. Well, I don't know, maybe that's true. It depends if you're an Android person or an Apple person. But it wasn't true in the first release. Lord knows, the first release of the iPhone, you couldn't cut and paste. Dear Lord, how can you have a phone? How can you do email on a phone if you can't cut and paste? That's stupid. But millions of people bought them. So I talked about this being two different things here in this good space. When we first deployed this, we talked primarily about the idea of balancing good as it related to sort of the customer's perspective. And unfortunately, what this got was some confusion from our folks at first about this viewpoint of just ship it, we'll fix it later. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is ship things as quickly as possible. We will add to it later, but we shouldn't be fixing it later. So this is originally Heinrich Nyberg idea, which this is not his version of the drawing, but this is about building a minimum viable product, and that in doing this, you don't incrementally build up the car because the initial increments are useless. What you do is incrementally build different things, each of which is perfectly useful and of high quality in and of itself. The skateboard's not bad. The skateboard's a great skateboard. The scooter is not bad. It's a great scooter. And so on and so forth. What each piece is doing there, and this could be a description of your entire product or it could be a description of modules within your product, each one of those pieces is good in and of itself. It's just not the final product. So this is something that would apply only to the world of coding, not our marketing people and so on. But one of the things we wanted to put, we like goofy acronyms like fizz-good. The other goofy acronym that we came up with in this space is, if internet usage, TLDR, too long didn't read, which is usually the way people treat their coding standards and policies and procedures. So we wanted to turn that around and make TLDR about that, something people could actually remember. So for us, the standard of something that is good from the perspective of a discrete release is something that is tested, logged, documented, and reviewed. And what this does, what that means is the individual items are actually of very high quality. Again, they don't have to be of so high a quality that we can evolve the skateboard into a car. That's not going to happen. But they are of sufficiently high quality that if we decided to continue to sell skateboards indefinitely, we would have great skateboards and we would do great in that business. So the only way that you can do this is by having high quality for the individual components. And in a lot of ways, what you're pushing back on by doing that is the small part. That the releases of individual MVPs or sort of potentially shippable increments are really small, and only eventually do they add up to something that you would market or deploy to customers. So the last one of these, decoupled versus coordinated. Starting with this feeds into what I was just talking about, is that as we build a product, we want to build a product that's more like a Lego house than a house of cards. Both of them are made up of individual components that add up to make the larger thing, but the individual components of the Lego house are each individually of high quality. They can each stand on their own, they can be added independently, they can be replaced independently, versus the house of cards, which even though, see how big this is, that's an impressive house of cards, but you are not replacing one of the items of the bottom of this house of cards. It'll all fall down. That house of cards is only standing up because all the cards are leaning on each other, unlike the Lego house. Because the alternative, if you do have coordinated items in a design sense, is that you are going to have to coordinate things in a scheduling and planning sense. And all of a sudden, you get bad people in the building. For the greater good, we have invited the other house of cards into the organization. So by designing things in a discrete way, that gives us the ability to, you're never going to get rid of dependencies entirely, either technologically or in a schedule sense. What you want to do is break them as much as possible so that satisfying those dependencies does not take tight coordination. You can take a service-oriented organization approach, like David again was talking this morning, where each part of your organization is doing their bits and then dropping their finished bits into the queue of the next team, who can then process that in a FIFO way rather than having to do tight coordination and scheduling. As an example of that, a concrete example in our world, we used to have a feature called class of service, which was a field in LeanKit cards. It said class of service and it had a field next to it. When we started doing this, we started rethinking how we did deployment of work. And rather than start with the front end or the administration or the things that a customer saw, the first thing that we added was a field in the database, and we pre-populated it for all accounts with the words class of service. Our front-end browser team was then able to change the front-end card stuff so that it fed off of that instead of the hard-coded words class of service. But it still said class of service as far as the customers were concerned. Our mobile team was able to do the same thing in their own sweet time. Later, once that was all out and completely working in production and we could test it by making changes directly in the database and seeing that it worked, then and only then did we do the administrative screen changes to allow customers to make that change. And only after that was out and working in production did we hand it to marketing to say, okay, you can now tell customers about it. Because we knew that 99.9% of customers wouldn't go into the administrative screens to notice that there'd been a change to the functionality, and since we'd pre-populated the field, they wouldn't see any change on their boards and their cards. So by working backwards in a very modular component fashion, we were able to make it where the individual teams, as long as they were within a few weeks of each other, this stuff all just happened and nobody had to talk about it. It was just work passing from team to team. So what we believe, what we have found, is that by doing things, if you can do all of these things in harmony, then you can do continuous delivery of lots of high-quality stuff in a sustainable way. But you have to do all of them. Because if you start doing bigger quarterly releases, you kind of have to coordinate them. If you're doing annually, they're going to get huge, and Lord knows you got to coordinate them. If things have to be perfect, again, you have to coordinate them, and so on and so forth. These are items that really have to be in balance for the whole thing to work together very effectively in a sustainable way. So, results. This is not something we've been doing for years and years, but we have been doing it in some of our teams anyway, for about 6 months, and we've seen really, really great results with this. So this is the results of our mobile team, which we thought we were doing pretty great, that before this, they were usually doing multiple releases to production per quarter. This is when we started doing fizz-good. This is the 4th quarter of this year. Same number of people. Went from doing a handful of production releases per quarter to doing 26, and this was just the month of January for the 1st quarter of this year. So by the end of the quarter, it added up to even more than those 26 releases. And that's just production releases that the customer saw, live releases in the App Store. There were actually 133 deployments of product to production during that time period. Same people, same tools, just a change in the mindset, the change in the way they organized their work. And we saw some pretty dramatic results. Again, small scale, but we think it's a pretty effective tool. Not by itself, not in replacement for other things, but as a tool for helping your people operate effectively within an Agile system. So far, from our perspective, it's proven to be quite an effective tool, and we might suggest that you take a look. So with that, questions? How can I help? Because otherwise we're going to go drink wine. I can answer questions out there. So this will be available online. It's under Creative Commons, so anybody is welcome to use it. Can't make money off of it, but you're welcome to use it. And yeah, happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.